Hey, what's up? Silas here. In this video, I'm going to be talking to you guys about feminism, the Me Too movement, and how that might be the death nail to the whole fourth wave of feminism that we're in right now, or just how the Me Too movement itself may be something similar to like the Kony 2012 movement. I just watched a pretty interesting summary of what that was. And the Kony 2012 movement was there was somebody in the United States of America, this Christian guy. He traveled to Uganda some years before, I think 10 years before 2012, so that's like maybe 2002. And he went out and he found out about this guy named Kony, this warlord who was out there in Uganda apparently getting child soldiers and doing all these horrendous things. And he decided he's going to actually create a movement to actually stop this. He took this as his calling, it was something he had to do to change the world, and created this whole mess of this slacktivist movement where a lot of people got activated just by tweeting, but when it came to actual action of going out in the streets and demonstrating, they did very little. They did donate millions to him, and he had a mental breakdown. And I think you're seeing some similarities. I'm seeing some similarities between something like the Kony thing and how a lot of the people in the Me Too movement, or just in general in the feminist movement, some of these current movements are behaving. There's a lot of breakdowns in some of the people running the things and just the actual content of what these people are supposedly trying to battle. People who are willing to fund these things but not actually participate in these things. So many similarities between what I saw, what has happened with the Coney thing, and you look back in history and you're like, wow, that was crazy. I can't believe we did that. And I think now you're going to look back at the current system with Me Too and just the feminism thing in general, and we might look back and like, I can't believe people were doing that. That's pretty crazy. But yeah, so I'm going to open up with these two quotes that I found on the Everyday Feminism Facebook page, which if you are on Facebook, I suggest you should follow, whether you do agree with feminism or not, because sometimes there are things that you're going to agree with. Some of the things just going to be like, wow, that's pretty cray. And some of the things will just make you kind of aware of what's going on in these spheres, what's going on in these kind of environments. And because when something like the recent situation with Judge Kavanaugh came out with Believe All Women and things like that came out, I was not surprised because I've been familiar about what's been coming from that sphere of the internet, of the world, of the ideosphere that humans have. I've been aware of the kind of mentality and kind of things that movements that they get behind, where truth itself, fact itself are not high on the totem pole. It's more the feels and raising awareness, and we need to get this thing done, and we don't really care how it gets done as long as we can get this out there somehow. So anyway, that was a lot of long intro. Apologies for that. Let's get into the quotes here. So the first quote: how do we hold people accountable for wrongdoing and yet at the same time remain in touch with their humanity enough to believe in their capacity to be transformed? And this is by Bell Hooks, and I completely agree with this. And I was like, wow, this is a great post. They even posted there and said, just kind of paraphrasing what I wrote, I was saying, yeah, this is key because holding yourself and others accountable to what they have done is a key part in them being able to change. Because if you were responsible of the bad things you did, then you can also be responsible of fixing those bad things and changing those things. Now, if the past was not you, if it was like the devil, or if it was like white man's rules I'm reacting to, or if it's poverty that's just making me have to be evil, change what I think is right or wrong, these are things that are outside me. I can't really fix them. Now, also, if this is just something that, some privilege that I just have, or some kind of God that just gave me the success, then at the same point, I can't actually look back and identify and say, okay, what are the things that I personally did? Who are the people who actually were in my life? What are the practices that I was doing? What are the things I avoided doing? So if you know that it's the people, it's the things that you did, it's the places that you were, then you can be like, okay, I can identify those things and make sure I keep those people in my life and value them. Make sure I keep making those practices that made me better in my life habits and actually avoid the ones that are against those things. And that gives you the strength and power to ability to do this. Now, about holding people accountable, this is a quote, this is a tweet by Bette Midler, who was an actress, singer from I think the late 90s, 2000s. She did the Wind Beneath My Wings. That was in the 80s, I think. I don't know. Not too important. She did a movie where she was like a witch with some other witches. But yeah, so she tweeted this out. Let me just read you the tweet. Quote, women are the N-word of the world, unquote. Raped, beaten, enslaved, married off, worked like dumb animals, denied education and inheritance, enduring the pain and danger of childbirth and life in silence for thousands of years. They are the most disrespected creatures on earth. So, what do you guys think about that tweet? What do you think the reaction was from her fans, people in the feminist movement, people outside of it? For me, the reaction resulted in lulls because I don't believe this at all about women. I think women have power and strength in their own ways. But let's just see the general reaction within the feminist movement. She deleted the tweet, apologized, but people were already on her. People were talking about how this is an example of white feminism appropriating the cause of black feminists. Why black feminists, like some black feminists in these comment section, are like, this is why we're never a part of this. Don't assume we're just part of your whole situation. Why are you appropriating our situation? There's images of some celebrities like Amy Schumer with her fist up at the Kavanaugh protests and things like that. I'm like, what is going on in this? Well, anyway, so this the cannibalism that goes on in some of these environments. It's pretty interesting to see. It gives me the lulls. But anyway, so somebody posted on this, was talking about, she could have posted this without the first thing, the women are the N-word of the world, even though that's in quotation marks, and that is actually a quote from a song written by Yoko Ono, and I think performed by John Lennon, who was a Beatle. So that's just a quote. I disagree with the quote, but it's a quote. It's not her necessarily saying this, but even the stuff after, someone is saying, okay, if this is true about women, then what are black women? I'm like, no. Women covers black women, covers all kinds of women. But now black women, black and white, in my opinion, are terms that are uniquely American. They're not necessarily talking about Europeans, because Europeans, within Europe, they have their own differences. You talk to someone in Turin, that's in Italy up north, they have general culture and general foods, like even the Italian they speak is going to be very different from like the Napolitanos, the people down south. They speak a different kind of dialect, have different kind of music they listen to. It's if you actually go to Europe and travel around, even though the place is a lot smaller than the United States of America, you will notice there's a lot of diversity in there. But I think the similar way how people left Europe and people left Africa, some people were definitely taken from Africa against their will and brought to the United States of America. But subsequent generations, subsequent immigration into the country has created a uniquely Asian culture, a uniquely black culture, a uniquely white culture in the United States of America that are separate. Because when you go back to Asia, you come to Africa, you go to Europe, you go to these places where these peoples come from, there's very distinct differences in the cultures and the behaviors of the people there. They don't really consider themselves this one block of people as they normally identify as in the United States of America. So in this sense, this person is talking about what are black women in this situation? I'm like, no, black women are counted in this because this is a very American-centric thing. Now, you look at places in the world where women might actually still be raped on a regular, I don't think there's a rape culture in the United States of America. They're not beaten at that high of level in the United States of America. I know it's still horrible. Enslaved, for sure, that doesn't happen. Married off, that doesn't happen in the United States of America. When is the last time you heard about someone just being married off in the US? I don't know. Worked like dumb animals? No. People might say like staying at home. At the same point, they say teachers are so brave and worth like our respect by raising these kids and things like that. But then if you stay home to raise your own kid, that's some kind of oppression, being worked like a dumb animal. Which one is it? Denied education and inheritance, especially if you're saying what are black women in comparison to this, I would say that black women in particular, I think, have one of the highest rates of graduation in the United States of America. That's also with debts, and what are they graduating in? Graduating in like hyphenated studies, which is not really that marketable of a skill or an ability. So there's some issues coming through with that. Also, the situation in the hypergamy, where women will be like, okay, if I have a post-grad degree, I'm not going to date anyone that doesn't have a post-grad degree. At the same point, they want to stay within their race or the black race. The black men are theirs, and then the black men don't really have that many degrees, so they don't want to date the people. So there's a lot of issues rising from that. Inheritance, in general, the black community just doesn't have that much to inherit as much as other communities in the United States of America, unfortunately, due to a bunch of different things, a bunch of different reasons. And during the pain and danger of childbirth, The black community in the United States of America, black women abort at a higher rate than any other group of women in the United States of America, than any other demographic. So when they actually do get to the point of having kids, death in childbirth is not that high in the United States of America. It may be high for a first world country, but it's still not that high. So when you come to all of these things, if somebody who may be in Bangladesh, living in some village out there, in some kind of Muslim environment or something, or some environment where people still are being married off, people still are beaten and rapes are regular things, people are being worked in actual fields and things like that. What are they? But this is American centric, and this is the slacktivist thing. This is the first world kind of problems type of things, first world protests. And these are the unfortunate things that I see out there. But hey, that's just part of life. And as I mentioned with the Coney situation, did I mention the Coney situation? This Coney 2012 was a situation where somebody from America went to the Uganda in 20. I just found this out in this documentary I watched, this short online documentary by the internet historian, where he went to Uganda in 2002 and found out about Coney, Joseph Coney, who was this warlord out there who had this army of child soldiers and other people as well, to other adults, but he was doing some horrible things there. And this guy took it into him to actually become the voice for this and evangelize for this and stop this. And he was going to stop Coney somehow. And then eventually it blew up in 2012 as this hashtag movement, Coney 2012, and got people interested. A lot of people were activated. People were 40 million or something hashtags or something, which is a lot when it comes to the internet, to Twitter and things like that. People donated, I think, millions to his cause, his different charities and things like that. And he personally lost it. The pressure of what was going on, he had a complete full-on breakdown where he was thinking people were after him, was thinking people in this movie, the Lorax, were talking to him and were like, you need to do this, you need to do that. He actually ended up having a complete breakdown where he went into the streets in San Jose. He was naked in the streets, just yelling. He went to the hospital. He thought the hospital people were trying to get at him. You should definitely watch it out. Check it out if you can find it. Just search for Internet Historian, Coney 2012, and you'll find this. But the relation to this and what I'm going to get into now, my whole thought that the Me Too movement in specific may finally be ending. And it's kind of rather a short span of it from when it started with Rose McGowan, who's going to be in the first article we talk about here, of accusing Harvey Weinstein, who is a big Hollywood mogul producer for Miramax or something, of sexual assault and sexual coercion and all these kind of things. And people came out later with other things like Me Too. So like, okay, Me Too, I was also harassed, and other people jumped on with other things. So the way this Coney thing kind of came up, it built up from 10 years of this guy doing different things, and then it got to the point where it finally caught on to the General Society. The General Society jumped onto it, donated tons of money to it, gave a lot of attention to it, and then when it actually came to actually doing something about it, the people who were controlling it, they kind of fell apart. People are looking at it and, okay, what's the actual things? What is the actual problem? How are we going to solve that problem? There wasn't any actual solid ways of doing that. And then it was found out like, okay, there's nothing here. And then it kind of went on. And now you look back and like, wow, I can't believe people actually did that. I can't believe people actually followed that thing. And I think Me Too, in 5-6 years, we're going to look back and be like, wow, I can't believe people were following that. I can't believe people were doing that. And yeah, I'm going to kind of make the case a bit with these few articles that I read here and kind of go into that kind of thing. So I think it was a point I was trying to make there. Might come back to me. Apologies if I missed it. But let's get into the first article here. And this is actress Rose McGowan, who triggered Harvey Weinstein's downfall, now claims that the Me Too movement is all bullish and a lie to make lily-livered Hollywood types feel better. So Rose McGowan was an actress. I remember her mostly from Charmed. It was this TV show where there were witches. Again, Bette Midler played a witch. She was a witch as well here. Then we also have the situations with witches and false accusations in the past, like witches who were a lot of women were the victims of false accusations of being witches, of having these witchcraft. And the Salem witch trials was very popular. Or it's a very folkloric thing of, not folkloric because it actually happened. Is folklore based on things that happened? Anyway, it's a historical time in, I think in the northeast of the United States of America, back in colonial times or pre-colonial times, there was a scare of witches and things like this. But it also goes back to Europe. It still happens in some places in Africa where people are accused of being involved in witchcraft. So some things in Africa or in developing countries just a little further back than they are in the first world countries. So some people in the first world countries look at something, oh, this guy's been accused of witchcraft and dragged through the streets. Like, this is so backwards. I can't believe these people do this. When their ancestors were doing the same thing just like a few generations ago. But hey, that's neither here nor there. Let's just pretend that didn't happen. I mean, some of the stuff, the reason you have witches and werewolves and vampires and all this stuff in your media and things like that is because people actually used to think those things existed and were accusing people of being those. But anyway, so back to this thing. She was an actress in Charmed. She was dating like Marilyn Manson for a while. Anyway, she did some different things and she exposed this huge thing. Harvey Weinstein, a lot of people started coming out and a lot of other people came out with actual cases of it. But as I was mentioning, some of the people who seem to be losing it, who are running these things, she was one of the heads of this. She was one that started this. And she has seemingly been having some mental issues. She's had some breakdowns and some appearances, shaved her head. Not that shaving your head means you have issues, but she seems somewhat unstable. Then you have someone like Asia Argento, who was also another big name that jumped on this. She had some situations. She had a situation where now she was accused of having had some sexual intercourse with somebody that she first met, a younger actor, when she first met him when he was like, I don't know, he was like 10 or 12 or something, 10 to 12 or something, and then later on they maintained the relationship after acting in this movie, and then when he was 17 and she was like 30 or something, they had sex, and so there's all these things in there, but it's legal because the age of consent there was, but then there was like some payment made to him so anyway, there's a lot of things falling apart with the Me Too movement, and I think this recent situation with Judge Kavanaugh being accused of having some sexual assault back when he was a teen against Christine Blasey Ford, that situation kind of shone a light on this, where I think that whole case was similar to this whole situation of that guy running the Coney 2012 being out in the street naked, and people were just like wondering, okay, what's going on? Who are the people actually running these things? Are we actually believing what this person is saying? Even though with that guy, it wasn't necessarily completely attacked to the actual situation with the Coney thing. But I'm losing my track of thought here. Let's get back to the story here. Okay, so the actress who kickstarted the exposure of Hollywood moguls who allegedly exploited positions of power to abuse women has branded Me Too campaigners against sex attackers losers. Rose McGowan accused producer Harvey Weinstein of rape this time last year, sparked an avalanche of allegations in the entertainment industry and beyond. As such, stars as Kevin Spacey and Morgan Freeman were alleged to have assaulted and harassed performers. Activists began using the hashtag to share their ordeals online. But McGowan has slammed the movement as bullshit in today's Sunday Times magazine, which comes the day after Judge Brett Kavanaugh was sworn in as a Supreme Court justice in the face of historic sexual assault allegations he denies. After years of stars such as Salma Hayek and Gwyneth Paltrow claiming to be victims of harassment, McGowan has said that she understands why Donald Trump supporters hate Hollywood, whose apparent liberalism she says is fake. On the subject of Me Too, she said, of hashtag Me Too, she said, I just think they're douchebags. They're not champions. I just think they're losers. I don't like them. How do I explain the fact that I got a GQ Man of the Year award and no women's magazines and no women's organizations have supported me? So she suffered anorexia while in an abusive relationship after she arrived in Los Angeles. The Death Proof star's early success was on the independent film circuit, but then she met Harvey Weinstein in a hotel room, and it is there that she alleges he raped her. The media mogul is accused of blacklisting the actress after the meeting, as well as deploying former Mossad agents to follow her and steal her memoir's manuscript. McGowan has also hit out on Meryl Streep, saying that she is literally impossible. The actress knew nothing of McGowan has also hit out at Meryl Streep, saying that it is literally impossible, unquote, that the actress knew nothing of Weinstein's sexual proclivities until last autumn. Streep has denied knowing about the producer's alleged behavior. Doshi says many women have a right to be angry. It says tight here. I think that's a typo. McGowan says hashtag MeToo activists have, quote, sold themselves a fiction, unquote, rather than face up to the true nature of Hollywood. McGowan was branded a transphobe after an altercation with a transgender activist in February while promoting her book Brave. Now, this altercation itself was, I think she was just saying, the transgender activist was saying, you're not actually focusing on what happens to transgenders, because she was saying what happens with transgenders. She was saying what happens with transgenders is actually more an issue or happens a lot worse, abuse that happens to them. And that's the whole oppression Olympics thing. What's this thing? The progressive stack or just the hierarchy where it's like, okay, as a X, Y, Z, Q, R, S, T, my oppression points overrule yours. So if you speak about any issue that you have, if that issue affects me in any one of these sections plus something else, that means you have to actually address my issue or me as a victim higher than you. So the victim hierarchy, the victim kind of, where it's like we're getting more victim points. Victimhood is something that they embrace, and it's just a sad thing. And that's the key. That's first quote that I read about the past actions. Now, I really detest that term victim blaming. When somebody has actually had something happen to them and you ask him questions about what happened in that situation, people say you're victim blaming. And there's something really sinister about this that I think I need to put in a separate video because I think it's something I need to refer to. When somebody says victim blaming, they're priming you to really accept that a victim has occurred. A victim is already there. Like with the Christine Blasey Ford situation, it was an accusation, allegations, nothing was proven. But when you say, okay, I don't really believe her, I'm not really wondering, like, where's the evidence? Where did it happen? How did you get there? How did you leave? Who was there again? Were you guys drinking? What time was it? What day was it? What year was it? Oh, you're victim blaming. Believe all women. But no, we haven't established that she's a victim. But if you accept somebody saying victim blaming to you asking questions about trying to find out if a situation happened, that already primes you to accept it as a victim, and then they're just going to provide to you the victimizer. So don't just accept that. And now if there is a situation where there actually is a victim, where we're like, yes, we understand somebody stole your car. We understand somebody raped you. We understand, we've seen it, we've seen the tape. But now we're asking you, how did you get there? Who knew you were going to be here? That's questioning, and those questions can actually end up saving other people's lives. It can help you catch the person who did the crime, who committed the crime. It can also set up some kind of situation where patterns where future people can avoid these patterns that may raise the chance of them being victimized. So these are positive things. I know there's certain ways to do it and ways not, but this whole victim blaming thing is an issue to me. Something that really bugs me. But yeah, okay, back to this. She thinks Weinstein hired the activist to ambush her at a public reading. Public engagements were canceled following the row. Weinstein denies all allegations leveled to him by McGowan, and he faces trial after being charged with sexual assaults. McGowan also faces trial for possession of cocaine, which she has claimed an operative sent by Weinstein planted on her. She also faces legal action from Asia Argento after claiming an allegation she slept with an underage actor is true. Argento denies the accusation. Again, that thing I mentioned before, McGowan apparently came in support of the person. So this is it bickering within these people, this fighting with each other. You see the cocaine situation. She's thinking people were sending these things to him. Which one is right? Which one is wrong? There's a lot of really crazy things going on in this. So in Brave, McGowan argues that feminism hasn't reached Hollywood, where 96% of directors are male. She says that the industry's male gaze has little interest in women beyond them being fuckable. Now, this whole situation, focusing on 96% of directors are male. I'm probably thinking the camera grips, the guys who tow around those huge cameras and move them all around the stage. I'm sure those are probably at least upper 90% male. There's a lot of other fields involved in Hollywood that are 90% male that the women are not really going to complain about. So this whole idea of equality, first of all, I think equality is a false god. It's even worse than a false god. At least myths and things like that have actually some way you can learn from myths. Even if you take away, if you understand these are not real things, you can still learn from them. Like the Odyssey, the Iliad, like with Odysseus and things like that. You can still learn from those stories. But equality is not, even if you accept it to be wrong, you can't really learn from that whole idea of like everyone's going to be equal. We can't all be equal. As Thomas Sowell said, even a man, even a person, no one is even the equal of themselves yesterday, and you're not going to be today. You're not going to be the equal of yourself tomorrow. So this whole idea of equality is bunk. I don't really agree with it. So it's not equality across the board. It's equality, apparent equality in certain fields, certain areas, certain positions where they want power. Okay. So she told the magazine that even watching the movies in question implicates the viewer in their mistreatment. This is far from the first time McGowan has spoken out on the matter, with the actress being very vocal in her refusal to align herself with the hashtag #MeToo or Time's Up movements. Back in January, she hit out at A-listers who wore black to the Golden Globes to protest Harvey Weinstein's sex scandal by calling the idea nothing but Hollywood fakery. She tweeted, "And not one of these fancy people wearing black to honor our rapes would have lifted a finger had it not been so. I have no time for Hollywood fakery." Unquote. She later branded Time's Up leadership of being fakes after they partnered with CAA. I think that's CAA. I think it's like a talent agency or something. McGowan has claimed that the agents at CAA were guilty of human trafficking for sending actresses, including Gwyneth Paltrow, to meet Harvey Weinstein in his hotel room. "Guess where they meet?" she tweeted. "Who do you think is behind this great PR? Why, it's a company of pimps that send so many to the monster's lair themselves. CAA, Time's Up fakes." So McGowan also took issue with the fact that none of the women who first came forward were even asked to attend the Golden Globes ceremony. Asia Argento stated that she had not been invited, while fellow sexual abuse harassment accusers Corey Feldman and Rosanna Arquette said they too were ignored by the group. "Why was I ignored tonight? No, you see? Do you see the hypocrisy here? Hollywood taking a stand in unity. When I wasn't invited?" Feldman asked Argento on Twitter, who replied, "Don't worry, I wasn't invited either." She later added, "Not only wasn't I invited to the Golden Globes, nobody asked my opinion about Time's Up, or to sign the letter. I supported at Time's Up now, even though I was excluded from it. Guess I'm not powerful, or Hollywood enough, proud to work behind the scenes." So Arquette, who accused Weinstein of sexual misconduct, also tweeted, "We weren't invited. Annabella Sciorra, Daryl Hannah, Mira Sorvino, none of us were." So this is kind of a situation where one of the first people who came up with this kind of situation that kicked off the Me Too, I think Me Too itself, the hashtag itself, was started by somebody else. Was this lady, this woman that I've seen kind of touted and subsidiary? I think she's like a black woman. She kind of went to the hashtag, and she's been touted as more of these things. But here, when they were talking about the Golden Globe situation wearing black, there was something that's going to lead into the next article where it went into something with the White Rose movement. And the White Rose movement came in after that. And I'm going to read you about this White Rose movement because it reminded me of another movement, which is kind of to go to what I'm saying, that women have always had power in different ways. Men have more power in the physical sense. Women have more power in the mental and influence sense. And when it comes to the actual term of power, I'm going to do this also in another separate video because I'm going to refer to this. When I talk about power, power is not only just strength. It's the same way how when people talk about wealth, people just equate it to money and things like that. When no. Wealth itself is wealth itself. Wealth just means you have a lot of valuable things, or whatever is considered valuable. So if you consider cattle valuable, like if you go to like a Maasai tribesman, he considers himself wealthy if he owns hundreds of cows. Like if you give him like hundreds of diamonds, they're technically more worth in the world money-wise, and those diamonds can probably go in and be exchanged for thousands of cows. But if he doesn't have the knowledge of exchanging that thing, they're just rocks to him because he doesn't value those things. So maybe like Jordans or something, like a good pair of Jordans, but it's like a bunch of cars. He's not gonna care about owning like 20 Ferraris. Because for him, a cow is more valuable in his life. So that's for him, he's wealthy by having those cows. So when it comes to this situation where people talk about power, I kind of equate this to this. Like a newborn baby is about as powerless a human being as you can think. But let's say this newborn baby is born to somebody like Bill Gates or Jeff Bezos, some of the richest people, most wealthy, money-wise people in the world ever. And they care for that kid. They're loving parents. That child has power over them. So think about the most powerful man in the world, the most powerful woman in the world. If they have a child, that they love and care for, that child has power over them. So that's what I'm talking about. There's different ways of having power here. So this white rose, this is from the Washington Post. The white rose makes its Grammy debut in support of hashtag MeToo. First picture here is Lady Gaga wore a white rose to the red carpet. I just saw this Lady Gaga video of her on a panel with the Dalai Lama. She's talking about some things that kind of made sense, but it was all over the place and things like that. But I was just kind of thinking, like, only in America could the path to being on stage with the Dalai Lama on a panel be wearing a meat dress, because she wore a meat dress and did oh god, this is Patrice Hilton thing about Lady Gaga's concert. It's just hilarious. You guys should check out search Patrice Hilton on YouTube. No, sorry. Patrice O'Neill on YouTube and Lady Gaga, and trust me, just search for it. I'm not going to leave a link because I want people to actually hear this and think what I'm saying is good enough. And if you've heard it, let people know how funny it is in the comment section. But the people actually go out and take my word for it and actually search for this. And that extra effort that you put in is going to be completely worth you finding that video and just enjoying it. And anyway, so my digression here. So back to this. Again, this is about the white rose at the Grammys. Not wanting to be left out of the current wave of Hollywood award show activism, the music industry has put a symbolic twist on the boutonniere. Boutonniere. Yes, it's kind of the thing people wear on their clothes and things like this. At the 60th Annual Grammy Awards on Sunday in New York, a number of artists, producers, and executives opted to accent their red carpet look with a white rose after a last-minute push by behind-the-scenes music industry professionals to come up with a gesture of unity for this hashtag MeToo movement. Moment, not movement. Taking a page from the Time's Up initiative against harassment and workplace inequality, which had its black dress debut early this month at the Golden Globes, a separate, more do-it-yourself organization called Voices in Entertainment began an email campaign on Wednesday to spread the word about the accessory of choice. The white rose, the group said, had historically stood for hope, peace, and sympathy and resistance. And it actually did, which is going to tie into the next story after I finish reading this. In a message sent to supporters and news media on Sunday ahead of the Grammys, Voices in Entertainment said it was fighting for equal representation in the workplace, for leadership that reflects the diversity of our society, workplaces free of sexual harassment, and the heightened awareness of accountability that our sisters started on January 1st and continued through the Golden Globes and onwards. Unquote. The letter of support, initiated by a dozen female executives who worried nothing else was being done for what is known as music industry's biggest night, was signed by hundreds of rank-and-file members of the music world, along with a ragtag collection of artists, celebrities, including the Grammys host James Corden, Fat Joe, Zayn Malik, Fergie, Kelly Clarkson, and Lisa Loeb. Then they have a picture here of Cardi B with a white rose. And Cardi B, for you who don't know, she sang like the Bodak Yellow song. I can't remember the song. She definitely has really catchy songs, but she was a stripper for a long time in her life, and she's still like very ratchet. She just had this fight with Nicki Minaj, was like throwing her shoes at this NYC Met Gala type of thing. So she's very ratchet and proud of it, and people seem to come behind her ratchetness, embrace it, and post her up for it. But to have somebody, I mean, supposedly it's a patriarchy, yet you can be a stripper and you can make millions and be this held up in society and come out and be from a position of telling people how they should behave. And it goes against this whole patriarchy thing. I don't think if it was really a patriarchy where women are devalued, where she'd be able to have this kind of influence and power and just voice and stance. Or anyway. So, before the show, Ms. Loeb acknowledged that the question of why music has yet to reckon with sexual abuse in its ranks the way movies, media, and politics have in recent months. I know some people are saying that the music industry took a little while to catch up, while some of the other industries, the singer said. But we haven't had as many award ceremonies. I hadn't read this before. So yeah, that's the thing. They think these award ceremonies are actually going to be like things that can actually change the world. Like, no, 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 no. In many cases, you're giving these awards to yourselves. Viewership for these things is dropping. People are getting tired of this. Like, what if you actually have this much influence, you're this wealthy people in the monetary sense, supposedly have all this time, you really care, then can't you do more outside of awards? When you organize an entire kind of get together where you're not like, oh, we have to be here at this award show anyway, so let's do something then. When you just come together and create something and do something on your own. All of you guys start YouTube channels and start talking about these things. Do something. But anyway. So the White Rose seemed to provide a manageable gesture for musicians to show that they were paying attention and stand generally against injustice, though the specifics of the mission could get lost. At the pre-show event, singer Reba McEntire invoked the golden rule, adding, "Let's just treat people kindly." Yeah, I can get behind that. On the red carpet, artists wearing the White Rose included Lady Gaga, Miss Clarkson, Khalid, Sam Smith. Khalid, DJ Khaled? I've never seen it actually written just Khalid. I guess they say that sometimes. It's weird. Miss Clarkson, is that Kelly Clarkson? Or is this somebody else named Clarkson? Anyway, the Chainsmokers and more. I really like the Chainsmokers. Is it the Chainsmokers? I'm thinking of the Mr. Wives. The Chainsmokers have a few good songs too. Okay, so, and more, though, opted not to adorn the outfit. So these are people. Wait, Lady Gaga didn't, but they had Lady Gaga with a rose here. She's wearing a rose. Well, anyway, on the red carpet, artists wearing a white rose included Lady Gaga, Miss Clarkson, Khalid, Sam Smith, the Chainsmokers, and more, though others opted not to adorn the outfits. Okay, they're talking about other people. For all these things. TMZ reported on Friday that New York florists had been flooded with requests and were even turning some people away. Voices in the entertainment industry said on Saturday that it had received a mass rose donation and would be handing out flowers at the Hotel Pennsylvania on Sunday. The E red carpet, E! I feel like you gotta yell that, so I got the exclamation mark. The E! Red carpet correspondent Juliana Rancic, had the flower affixed to her microphone, while others like SZA, I'm saying SZA because of like RZA from the Wu-Tang Clan, so it's a SZA, Cardi B, and Sarah Silverman held their flower in their hand or even mouth. So yeah, it was Sarah Silverman clowning it up as usual. So Cardi B, who was nominated in 2 rap categories, was more characteristically pointed when addressing sexism in the music industry. "I can get you on Billboard," she said, mimicking a male executive, before adding, "Whoops, there's my penis." Okay, Okay, so I had mentioned before the Coney situation. The guy went out and he was naked in the street, and then some people accused him of actually masturbating, and he actually didn't do that. The police actually went and arrested him and took him to the hospital and not the jail because it was like they realized that he was mentally wrong. There's something wrong with him. Like, this is in a situation where it's like we should arrest this person because this is like somebody who's just having an issue. He's not out there like on the street like masturbating and things like that. So that was because he was naked, and that kind of thing is not good. Just like it's written here, like, "Whoops, there's my penis." Just popping your penis out and exposing yourself to somebody like that, it's not good. It's some form of assault. It's some kind of thing there. But the Women's March type of thing. I remember being on the train. I was in DC for the inauguration of Donald J. Trump, and I decided on the day after I was going to go and check out the protest. So I'm in the metro, on the train, and we seeing all these women in the pussy hats. And I'm thinking like, this is going to be interesting. And I just realized that these older women wearing these hats and they're evoking, they're making you think of their genitalia. And I'm like, that's kind of like, why are you trying to evoke that image in people? And they had worse pictures where people were wearing entire vagina suits. And I'm just like, why are you trying to evoke this on somebody? We're not trying to think of that. They're saying, oh, don't think of us as just this, but then also think of us as just this. And then the worst, to make that even worse, is the fact that kids were involved in this situation. There was kids running around, and I'm like, why are you putting this on your children? Why are you reducing your children to their genitalia in this situation, or having them look at you as... And I think it's a similar thing to that Coney situation, where these people are just not okay in the head. Just like some of the men who are doing these things. They're still criminals for doing this, exposing themselves and harassing themselves, women in these kind of senses, or men in some situations like Kevin Spacey and things like that. But that kind of exposing yourself to somebody, making them think of your genitalia, exposing them in that kind of sexual way, it's a sexual imposition on people at least. So I think in a similar way that you looked at this man, this Coney man, and be like, that guy was crazy when that happened. I think we're going to look back at some of these pictures of these women wearing these vagina costume things, and we're going to look at them and be like, those are crazy people. That was a momentary lapse in sanity for some of these people. I think they're going to be a lot more ashamed about that. But so Cardi B has gone through this, and with Cardi B, she's also very sexual in herself. So sometimes also she's like, "Oh, I can get you to listen to my song. Whoops, here's my boobs." So it's like, here's my booty. It's like, okay, you're using that as well too to get stuff that you want from us, and when other people do that from you, it's it's a weird situation. It's it's what people do. People use this kind of weird trade situation here, and it's just it's a really icky situation that I don't really ah eh yeah. Anyway, so as I was mentioning this whole white rose thing, I was thinking of this white rose thing, and with the white rose thing, it was something in the world wars, and it started in Germany. Let me actually look it up because the white rose thing was bad enough, but I'm going to read you something about the white feathers, which is also related to this. But let me tell you about the white rose a bit, and then we'll go into the actual article that talks about the white feather. Because for a second, I thought the white rose was what the white feather movement was. And it really incensed me. I was talking to a friend and I was really pissed off. I was like, I can't believe they're using this thing because what it actually was. And then I actually found out what the white rose was also. And I was like, okay, it's still kind of messed up, but it would have been a lot worse if it was white feather. So the white rose, I think it was World War II. Or it was World War II. I should be sealed high. Okay, White Rose, World War II. The White Rose. The hopes. The White Rose was a nonviolent intellectual resistance group in the Third Reich, led by a group of students and professors at the University of Munich. The group conducted an anonymous leaflet graffiti campaign which called for active opposition to the National Socialist regime. National Socialist regime, because the Nazis were socialists. So when you hear people talking about democratic socialism and support of socialism, realize that they are also supporting something that the Nazi Party supported. Well, anyway, so their activity started in Munich on 27th of June 1942 and ended with the arrest of the core group by the Gestapo on the 18th of February 1943. They, as well as other members and supporters of the group who carried out distributing pamphlets, faced show trials by the Nazi People's Court, the Volksgerichtshof, and many of them were sentenced to death or imprisonment. The group wrote, printed, and initially distributed these pamphlets in the greater Munich region. Later on, secret carriers brought copies to other cities, mostly in southern parts of Germany. In total, the White Rose authored 6 leaflets, which were multiplied and spread in a total of about 15,000 copies. They denounced the Nazi regime's crimes and oppression, and called for resistance. In their second leaflet, they openly denounced the persecution and mass murder of Jews. By the time of their arrest, the members of the White Rose were just about to establish contacts with other German resistance groups like the Kreisau Circle, the Schulz-Boysen/Harnack group of the Red Orchestra. Today, the White Rose is well known both within Germany and worldwide. Okay, just had a little jump there. So that was what the White Rose was in the war. And this is part of just the part that infuriates me about some of these people. You have these celebrities living the lives that they have, in the country that they have, in a society that enabled them to achieve this level of life that they have and freedom and choice and things like that. Yet they try to equate what they're going through to what was going on under Nazi Germany. And things like that sicken me. And the reason I thought about the White Rose was like, if the White Rose is actually the white feather thing, it's just, let me read this article. It's from The Guardian. First World War, the men who would not fight. And there's a picture here of conscientious objectors to military service. And I'm going to open with this. Back in the early 1900s, to vote, you had to be open for the draft. It was mostly men voting. Not every single man could vote, but if you did, you were normally a landowner and you were open to the draft. You were consular to the draft. And wars actually did exist at that time. There was actually a high chance that you would be drafted. And even later than that came to the Vietnam War and people were being drafted. But by the time the Vietnam War came by, women were allowed to vote, but they weren't being drafted into the war. Yet now you have feminists trying to get women on the front lines. I'm like, what's wrong with you people? Why would you want to be on the front lines? Why would you want to put women in? Do you really care about women's lives? You want to get them on the front lines to be shot at? Why would you want that? Well, the early feminists didn't want that. They weren't about equality. They never were really about equality. When the whole situation was like, okay, yeah, you can vote, but the draft is tied into voting, they were like, no. Once that was taken off the table, like, okay, let's jump back on the suffragette movement. Let's jump back on that whole situation of getting the vote, because that was taken out. That already started showing how they don't necessarily want equal rights. They just want certain rights with certain dispensations, because men and women are different. It's not surprising to me. But if you say men and women are the same, and then you say believe all women, and then if you're supposed to believe all women, but all women are like men, then shouldn't you believe men as well? But anyway, back to this thing. This thing really pisses me off. I'm going to get into reading this. So, Order of the White Feather, My Coward Grandfather. After reading, in quick succession, 4 books about men who fought the war, I took out a box of flimsy, yellowing letters and tried yet again to imagine what my grandfather went through. He had 3 small daughters, which saved him from conscription, and his attempt to volunteer was turned down in 1914 because he was short-sighted. But in 1916, as he walked home to South London from his office, a woman gave him a white feather, an emblem of cowardice. He enlisted the next day. By that time, they cared nothing for short sight. They just wanted a body to stop a shell, which Rifleman James Cutmore duly did on February 1918, dying of his wounds on March 28th. My mother was 9 and never got over it. In her last years in the 1980s, her once fine brain so crippled by dementia that she could not remember the names of her children, she could still remember his dreadful, useless death. She could still talk of his last leave, when he was so shell-shocked he could hardly speak, and my grandmother ironed his uniform every day in the vain hope of killing the lice. She treasured his letters from the front, as well as information about his brothers, who also died. She blamed the politicians. She blamed the generation that sent him to war. She was with Kipling. Quote, "If any question why we died, tell them because our fathers lied." Unquote. She was with Sassoon. Quote, "If I were fierce and bald and short of breath, I'd live with scarlet majors at the base, and speed glum heroes up to the line of death. And when the war is done and you stone dead, I'd toddle safely home and die in bed." Unquote. But most of all, she blamed that unknown woman who gave him a white feather and 1,000 of brittle, self-righteous women all over the country who had done the same. And there was thousands of them, as Will Ellsworth Jones makes clear in his fascinating account of a group of conscientious objectors. We will not fight. After the war, Virginia Woolf suggested that there were only 50 or 60 white feathers handed out. But this was nonsense, as Ellsworth Jones' diligent research shows. Some of his stories still have the power to make the reader angry. A 15-year-old boy lied about his age to get into the army in 1914. He was in the retreat of Mons, the Battle of Marne, and the first battle at Ypres, before he caught a fever and was sent home. Walking across Putney Bridge, 4 girls gave him white feathers. Quote, "I explained to them that I had been in the army and had been discharged, and I was still only 16. Several people had collected around the girls, and there was giggling, and I felt almost uncomfortable and very humiliated. Unquote. He walked straight to the nearest recruiting office and rejoined the army. This was extracted from The Guardian on March 11th, 2008. The Order of the White Feather, founded in August 1914 by Admiral Charles Fitzgerald, encouraged women to give out white feathers to young men who had not yet joined the British Army. So the plight of objectors, letters from the time. Jack F.G. If you are not in khaki by the 20th, I shall cut you dead. Ethel M. Personal column on the Times, on July 8th, 1915. And that's the thing, like khakis were actually army gear or military gear. Now they're just regular clothes. So the same way how like the camo stuff has become that. But let me keep reading this. This is something that really, really bugs me. But yeah. So I was taken to the Tower of London and locked in a large dungeon where there were 20 or so prisoners. 6 were objectors. I was to be taken to Chester Castle, and my wife traveled with me. The Cheshire Regiment did not have a good reputation for its treatment of objectors. The previous week, the newspaper had carried reports of how George Beardsworth and Charles Dukes, both subsequently permanent trade union leaders, had been forcibly taken to the drilling ground and kicked, punched, knocked down, and thrown over railings until they lay exhausted, bruised and bleeding. I was a little apprehensive. This is by Fenner Brockway, conscientious objector and future MP, member of parliament, I think. And you can see this. You can see the same behavior kind of being carried out by some of these movements, where they're like, if you're a man and you're not a supporter, you're also dragged down. You have to join this war. You have to join this fight against the patriarchy. You have to be a supporter. You have to lean in. You have to do all these things. And no, you don't, because you have to prove that there actually is a situation. You have to prove that this is actually a just situation for somebody to enter and fight. You don't just sit there and giggle as people are sent to. If you can actually, people who actually read the history of the wars and the things that were going on, it's the horror that happens in wars is just crazy. And the fact is as well, when you have someone like Hillary Clinton saying that women and children are the biggest victims, or women are the biggest victims of war because they lose husbands and sons and fathers. Man, okay. So back to this. The final test of sincerity is a willingness to face consequence, and the supreme test, the perseverance of death. We hope that people will now be satisfied that the conscientious objector may at least be what he professes to be, and is not necessarily a mere coward masquerading under fine pretense. This is Manchester Guardian on June 27th, 1916. Last one. Dear Frank, I wish you know the exact reasons why I am anxious to be released as soon as possible. They are not all, or even principally, that prison is disagreeable. My principal reason is that I have ideas for what I believe to be a really important piece of philosophical research, but in spite of my utmost efforts, I find it very hard to accomplish much here. Later dated August 12, 1918, from Bertrand Russell to his brother while in prison for publicly supporting and negotiated peace with Germany. So Bertrand Russell is one of the famous, let me get exactly what he's famous for because I don't want to get this wrong. He's a British philosopher, logician, mathematician, historian, writer, and what's his most famous work? Let's check this. Let me double check this. Just to be sure, I want to get this right. I've heard his name. I'm rather familiar with his name. I need to get better at actually being able to call out names. And part of the crippling thing that I have for this is the internet, where it's like, okay, I can get ideas and I hear someone's name and I'm like, okay, then you can just look online and find the information. And that's part of this problem right now. You can't just make accusations and not have the information to back it. You can't just say, I know this thing, I believe this thing, and not have the information to back it. You have access to information. You can find out these things. There's ways to do these. So Bertrand Russell, what's he most known for? He's a big person in Western philosophy, and the whole problem of the world is fools and fanatics in ways certain themselves, but wiser people are full of doubts. That's one thing that I think a lot of people are famous of. And this thing, if Bertrand Russell had actually received the White Rose and had somehow guilted enough to actually go out into the war and you'd have lost a mind like Bertrand Russell, how many other people were lost in this? Wow, he wrote the Principia Mathematica. Yeah, I should. Bertrand Russell should be a name that I actually know in my mind. That's really crap. It's gonna be one of the people. I'm gonna try to keep him in my mind. Look up, but anyway. So that's been a long video. But what do you guys think about this? What do you guys think about the Me Too movement? Have you supported the Me Too movement? Do you think it's similar to like the Coney thing, where people would look back and be like, was this some momentary lapse of slacktivism or some kind of temporary insanity that went on something that was actually there, like the Coney situation? There actually is a Coney. He's actually doing horrible things out there. But was that whole movement actually going to affect that situation? Was it really due to actually the things Coney was doing? Because Coney had been doing that for a while. Why did it take 10 years for it to become this massive hashtag movement online on donations and things like this? Why were other charities kind of salty because he was taking away so much donations? It happened around this time where I think it was like something Women's Day or something, and that was a big time of donation to Coney. And it's also today, yesterday was World Mental Health Day. And we're talking about how some of these things are this temporary insanity that catches people. Why does it catch people's minds in that way? Why do people get into these things? Why do people think there's a rape culture when there isn't? Why do people seem to want there to be a rape culture when there really isn't? Because you talk to some of these people and they truly believe they're constantly under threat. And that's a horrible situation to be in. I've thought that some while, but I do realize that when I thought those things, when I thought there was actually some white conspiracy to keep down Africans, keep down people of my race or my skin color, my background, when I thought that, it was a crippling kind of situation, and I shed that and was like, no, I can do things. I know there's some people out there who may look at me and assume things from me because of who I am, because of what I look like, and try to hold me back. But that's not everyone. It's not this whole entire kind of situation where there's this entire plan to just hold me down. And I almost actually prefer people who look at me and make up an assumption and be like, oh, because Silas looks like this, talks like this, comes from this place, not because of anything Silas actually is, I'm going to avoid this person. The people who do that take themselves out of your life. And that's positive. I'm like, okay, I don't want to deal with somebody who's going to just deal with me as a person based off of previous assumptions and not actually look at me as an individual. The people who are actually more damaging are people who look at me from their previous assumptions and expect positive things about me and then cling on to me, because those people come into your life for not due to who you are, but due to who they think you are based on these other things that you really have no control over, if that makes any sense. But this whole situation, World Mental Health Day yesterday. Today was I'm recording this on Thursday, the 11th of October, 2018. It's the day of the girl child. And I saw this advert scrolling through Instagram. My Instagram is at Anonymous Elise or at Dying Alive. I have two of them. You can check either one out. I was scrolling through and I saw this thing saying, child marriage and female genital mutilation still occurs illegally in Kenya. That's where I am right now, Nairobi, Kenya. So yes, that does happen illegally. And that's what I was talking about. Some places in the world, they actually have it where that Bette Midler thing was talking about how they're married off like as kids. And yeah, that does happen in some places. It still is happening. It's not happening in the United States of America, but it definitely is happening in some places. And if you want to just say that's all of us. But in that part, female genital mutilation, illegally. Why is it female genital mutilation instead of just child genital mutilation? Because there definitely is legal mutilation of boys when they're born, when they're kids. Circumcision is a thing that's done even in Western countries. It's still, I think it said like 40% or something like that in the United States of America are circumcised, and most of it is when they're babies, when they're born. That happens. In Kenya, that's completely illegal. It's not illegal. It's not even talked about being illegal at all. I remember was driving around like the city. This is like actual full-on city, suburbia, and seeing some people, this procession of people. This guy was wearing this boy was in this paint and things like that, and wearing some kind of costumes and having a headgear, and people behind him were chanting and jumping and things like that, and like dancing. And I was like, okay, what's that? And that was a procession for a circumcision, and that's still an accepted thing. There's no place in the world that has female genital mutilation and not male genital mutilation. There are many places in the world that have female genital mutilation to be completely outlawed. That doesn't even happen. If it does happen, it's like, this is crazy. Like in the West, that thing's coming back. They're importing in immigrants who are bringing that in, and they're like, well, we just it's part of their culture. No, it's not. It's part of their culture, and their culture is worse for doing that. Anyway, so you have that kind of situation where it's illegal in the West, yet it's still an accepted thing for men to do. It's an accepted thing for women to actually come out and say they prefer men that were genitally mutilated as children. I saw this video of Sandra Bullock on the Ellen DeGeneres show talking about this face cream that she took to some of the people in Ocean's 8, because it has to be in Ocean's 8 because it's all women, girl power, yay! It was like kind of just a redo of the Ocean's series of movies, Ocean's 11, Ocean's 12, Ocean's 13, which is a redo of a movie that was done back in the 50s, 70s maybe, like Sinatra and like Sammy Davis Jr. But anyway, George Clooney redid it, and now it's done with like all this women cast, and they were talking about this facial cream or thing Sandra Bullock uses that is partially made from the circumcised foreskins of Korean baby boys, and I'm just like, they're like sitting there laughing and talking about it like, ha ha ha, just, and I'm just like, what world is this? What world is this where grown women who are millionaires, who have more money and wealth and power, and when it comes to just financial wealth and ability and choice, than 99.9% of the men existing in the world, can sit there and be in a world where people look at that and still be part of this whole movement saying there's a patriarchy and women are oppressed and women are the N-word of the world. And I really do think people are going to look back at this time and just be like, wow, what were people thinking at that time? Well, I'm going to end the video here. It's been kind of mixed up and all over the place. It's a lot of different things came into this video, a lot of things I've been taking, and I'm going to have a few more videos coming up where I'm just reading things. I have things saved where I want to read and kind of let you guys think and interact with things that I've seen, see if there's things that I'm seeing wrong or you guys are seeing, or things in these things that you haven't seen, or am I just making these connections fallaciously? Are they not really there? Are you guys seeing some of these things? Are there things I missed? Are there other things you'd think that would be interesting to me? Are you surprised by some of these things going on, or is it expected? How long do you think these things are going to go for? Do you think they're going to get worse before they get any better? So yeah, lots of questions. Like, share, and subscribe. Links below in the low bar to the merchandise store. You can go there and buy some merch. I'll be posting some more merchandise up. Also a link to my Patreon, and I'm going to put the PayPal link soon, so donations in that sense would be greatly appreciated. I'm going to try to improve the content on this channel if I can get a situation where I get a better mic, get some other things that I'm thinking that can help me get these things going faster in a more regular schedule. But like, share, and subscribe. Let me know what you think in the comment sections. Thank you for listening. Goodbye.